Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. In today's session, we'll explore how retailers can take control of their in-store networks to build more relevant, scalable, and high-performing retail media offerings. We'll discuss key themes like precision, ownership, and setting the foundation for long-term growth in this rapidly evolving space. To tackle this topic, we're joined by Jonathan Franco, Global Head of Retail Media at Broadsign, and Colin Lewis, Founder and CEO of Retail Media Works. Welcome, Jonathan and Colin.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great to have you. To kick things off, can you both each share a little bit about your background and experience in the retail media space? And Jonathan, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in this space for a while. I'm coming from experience with Neptune Retail Solutions. You might also know them as News America Marketing, which is essentially monetizing the in-store world, specifically in North America. And now I've been at Broadsign for a year and a half, coming up to a little bit more than that. If you don't know Broadsign, so here at Broadsign, we help retailers turn their in-store screens into engaging shopping experiences. Broadsign is an end-to-end advertising technology platform that helps those retailers manage all types of content, whether it's brand, loyalty, marketing content, all the way to programmatic activation, all in one centralized location.
Colin.
So I'm Colin Lewis. I'm from Retail Media Works, and we work with retailers around the world to help them set up their retail media network business from startup to scale up. I also work with brands to help them think through their digital commerce and retail media strategies. And as my sort of little side hustle is I write a lot about retail media, and I think I was trying to work it out the other day. I think I'm close on 350,000 words in the last couple of years. So if anybody's struggling to sleep at night, I'll send them some of my reports so they can guarantee to be and the other thing I do is get to talk to people like yourselves and panels and stages around the world, which is a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Do you have an audio version?
Well, you definitely will fall asleep after that, that's for sure. And I can do a live stream if people really want.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to be on this call with you, Colin.
Well, no, it's going to be so much fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Same.
So I'll kick off with the first question. Why is in-store media such an important piece of the retail media puzzle right now? Jonathan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting, but challenging to be in retail media right now. There's, for retailers, I mean, I feel for them, there's a lot of pressure to be delivering, especially for retail media leaders, to be delivering significant incremental growth, even like double-digit profit growth. There's a lot of expectation, and I think those expectations are not always realistic. So when it comes for a brick and mortar retailer, in-store is the environment that's a key differentiator against all the big digital media giants. But more importantly, digitizing that store, I think to me is the portion that's no longer optional. And we're not just talking about screens like ESL, smart carts, upgrading their POS system, scan and go, audio technology. Retailers who actually decide to digitize their store, they're not just upgrading their operations. I think they're unlocking a new growth engine. And so that's responding to the pressure that they're getting in generating more revenue. The second part of the in-store conversation that I feel some of us are having, but we should be having even more, is making sure that once you've done all of this, in-store is not operating in a silo. We need to make sure that it's all unified under a retail media strategy that includes off-site, that includes on-site, that includes all the various different channels. And in the near future, hopefully, we'll also have marketing, merchandising, and retail media team all working together under that unified strategy to deliver the same growth.
Okay, Colin,
I'll kick off then because I'm amongst the thing I'm most excited in retail media is in-store screens for a number of reasons. So the first one is it's a mega trend in digital signage. Digitization of stores, as Jonathan pointed out, is a mega trend. It's a mega trend around the world for one very obvious reason is that it's really just no longer sustainable for us to have cardboard end caps that get ripped out every couple of weeks and all that sort of stuff. When I was a kid, my very first job I think it was 21, was driving a blue van around the place. And what I had to do the merchandising in store, and I'd be stacking my jams and marmalades and bringing in the cardboard, and then I'd go back 2 weeks later and it'd all be thrown out. To my horror, that still continues all those years later. So digitization of the in-store is a mega trend for one reason alone, sustainability. But then if we actually go to the next part of that trend of examining that trend, is the fact that the technology of the screens associated with not just the sort of, if you will, dumb screen, as in the screen itself, but also the content management systems, the advertising systems, and the stack behind that is radically changing. In fact, I constantly have to upgrade my own thinking about the technology because it's moving on so fast. Even what I used to think a year ago, I've kind of thrown that out and sort of re-upped it, if you will. And the third bit is that the other mega trend is, guess what? Linear TV is sort of going downhill a little bit more and a little bit more, starting very slowly and now much faster. And in-store screens are a part of that it can really help capture people in a very high engagement environment. So it's the screen business is inevitable. What's happening in store is inevitable, and the wave is just starting.
Mm-hmm. And when you walk into a store, I mean, you can't skip that experience. When you're seeing that screen with the technology that comes behind it, that ad is delivered to you as a shopper. So you can't skip it. You can ad block it. You can't scroll past it. So that's very exciting on that front.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one of the things I talk a lot to brands. I mean, as I said, a third of what I do is talk to the brands. And one of the things I really noticed, Jonathan, is that you can see the people in the room when I'm doing a workshop. They haven't quite got their head around that particular thing you pointed out, which is it's not like it's blocked. It's not like it's on a small little screen like my my iPhone here. It's not like subject to a little thumb slip or anything like that. And it's if I had one wish, it would be that people kind of understand the potentials of screens compared to where we were even 5 or 6 years ago.
So what makes in-store a unique lever for retailers in comparison to e-commerce or off-site retail media, Colin?
Well, I'm going to definitely have a few opinions on this one. So first of all is the ability to have a very engaging, very interesting, eye-catching creative that captures people in the moment when they're in the store, when they're ready to buy. And it's not just me who has this opinion. There's a quote I use when I'm doing some of my keynotes, which is from the chief exec of Procter & Gamble. And he said very clearly, which is, I believe most of the decision making when it comes to CPG products is kind of made in store. So the store with this super engaging capability, which is the screen and the technology behind it, is a perfect place for that thing. It's a conversion. The second reason is that it clearly does a double job. If you're a nerd like me, and I recommend you are not thinking like I think, because I think about marketing stuff all the time, and there's a big row going on in the marketing world between the idea of brand and performance. And there's one crowd over here saying brand is what you need to do because that will build the brand long term, and there's another crowd over here saying performance not so good, and they never the twain shall meet. But in-store screens deliver both a brand message and a performance message. This is the key takeaway for the brands out there. It's not like some of the outdoor advertising folks who are out there hawking their wares, if you will, because those screens are a different job. In store, there's actually 2 or 3, can actually solve 2 or 3 different jobs: brand, performance, and actually excitement at the same time.
Jonathan, would you like to step in there as well?
Couldn't agree more. I think, however, you mentioned dumb screens earlier. So in order to do this and to be engaging and eye-catching, we definitely need to make sure that we're providing added value to the shopper, and shopper experience should be first, right? So in order for us to do that, there's a foundation that we need, which is data. And a lot of retailers have this data. That's a big differentiator, but how is it connected and how actionable it is makes a big difference for us. Obviously, you'll have eventually the brain or the platform that decides which content to play where and when, but we need to make sure that this data foundation and the infrastructure that comes with it, that's the precision, that's the added value to make sure following like similar like digital concepts, we're providing the right content or the right message at the right shopper at the right time.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we're missing the mark.
The first-party data is still a world that not everybody really understands as well as they should. They kind of understand it in the online world, but that capability is rapidly being transferred into what's possible with screens.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of expanding on that topic of precision, what foundational infrastructure do retailers need in store to run retail media networks with precision and consistency?
I think it's one for John now.
To me, it's the connection between the data and the delivery of that data. So we make sure that we're providing the right content at the right place. Any types of triggers, whether that would be stock inventory, promotional messages, even the weather could also help influence what kind of content we're putting in front of the screen. That's the infrastructure that's really required. Without a good understanding of the data, and as Colin mentions it, there's still a lot of work to be done on understanding and actioning the first-party data. You're just putting up screens, and it's just acting as a fancy wallpaper.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely want to take up that point there, Jonathan, because it's how sometimes where we come from when it comes to screens, we're seeing them like as outdoor things where. When I was buying large-scale outdoor campaigns, it was up for 14 days, and then it would come down, or it would be, bought on block for a month, whatever the case is. And I think people still bringing that mentality to that. And you didn't get any data, you didn't get anything, you just got the thing up on the wall, and that was it, or on the bus stop, or on the underground. Now, this new world of screens is actually one where it can actually be driven by data. And in many cases, the data can include a recognition of the type of audiences that go to that store, the time of day. And then you get into that a little bit more. And then you've got this opportunity whereby instead of us, the old school way, we have an outdoor poster that stays up for 14 days. We can actually do messaging and promotions that are tied in with the time of day, with the weather, as Jonathan points out, but with everything. So let's say it's in London, it's a Thursday night, and it's a night where people get paid and we go out. Is the message that we're going to have in store different from say 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock if it was a health and beauty store compared to what I might have in between sort of 9 and 12? And so this idea of day parting with different creative and even different parts of the store is now all possible with the new types of content management systems that are out there. And yet we're still kind of have a little bit of legacy of how we think about this. So it's actually as good as your imagination is. Like the creative options are just incredible. And that's why the data is not just around pure, ones and zeros. It's around insights into thinking, what's the use case, what's the time of day, what's the product, what's the promotion. You really got to get into it.
Absolutely. Then day parting is actually a great example because we see that also with food service, C-stores or grocery stores at a specific time around 3 to 6 p.m. as you're driving back to home after a long day of work. What are you going to eat for dinner tonight? And then you have all these ads popping up at a specific time period. So that makes total sense. Yeah.
Jonathan, I was talking to a couple of brands in the last few weeks. I was doing a couple of workshops, and what was very interesting was the difference in mindset. So there was a few who were like looking at me when I was explaining this idea of different times of day and what was possible. They were like, "Wow, that's amazing! I haven't thought about that." Yeah, and then immediately they cut into, "Oh, that sounds like a lot more work." But there was others going, no, we already understand that, and we have different messages that we might have for, say, the screen at the window. We have a different message that we would have for the screen at the end of the aisle, and we have a different message for the screen at that. And so this sort of granular thinking is actually the way forward. And even though Jonathan and I are saying day parting, we don't just mean day parting in and of itself. We kind of going, think about the thing at the door. Think about the thing at the end of the aisle. Think about, is it a C-store? Is it people going out for the big shop on a Saturday? What's the profile of the customer in that store versus another store? So it's all very interesting and a real challenge from a creative department, but it's one that I think, and marketing department, but I think it's one that people will relish.
How can retailers ensure in-store media is targeted and relevant, not just more noise for shoppers?
Well, that's back to that customer experience piece. I'm sure
Right.
Jonathan has some strong views on it, but we've come maybe from a perspective of let's put the thing in front of Jonathan, let's put the thing in front of Colin, whatever, and sort of not really thinking through the nuances of that. And what you don't want in store is what's called the Christmas tree effect, where there's just lights and stuff and noise like everywhere. So the thing has to be the use of the in-store screens has to be nuanced around tying in with creating a good experience for the user, but the shopper in this case here, because it's this case where the needs of the shopper, the needs of the store, and the needs of the advertiser are actually in a triangle, but they're all kind of joined together. Because if it's too busy, too cluttered, that doesn't suit the retailer, because it definitely doesn't suit the customer. And also the conversion from the brand side won't be there. So it's one of these ones where I think the three parts of that are much more tightly engaged and much more incentivized to deliver great content. What do you think, John?
I couldn't agree more, but I'm going to add a little layer of complexity to that. Even within the retail-led messages, there is also a lot of conflicts within the different departments on which message is going to be pushed first in front of customers. So are we talking loyalty campaigns, promotional messages, or private label? So as we're trying to have a balanced mix of retail-led content and brand content, you need to make sure that you're understanding what the role of that screen is. What are we trying to achieve? It's not just by putting up more screens that we're going to be influencing more shoppers and driving more sales. It's by having a right purpose. Not every screen is going to be about brand monetization. Some will just be about education or telling shoppers how to navigate that specific section of the store. Some products are very complex in some of the verticals, so you want to take time and educate with some content there. So again, yes, all the connections with the triangle is definitely necessary, but even within the triangle, there's some conflicts. And so we need to have a cohesive approach and have the right infrastructure in place to provide value to the shoppers at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The internal ways of working and thinking about this, again, if you're coming from a legacy perspective, you got to go, sell, yeah. However, with the prevalence of screens, or digital screens, we're going to have to think through the shopper experience in a lot more detail. In fact, I was in a store in Portugal last week, and we were going through everything. They did an excellent job on it. Now, that's for sure, because they really thought through the user experience and the way the merchandising was together, and so on. But they kind of had to lock themselves into one or two ways of approaching it. And I think one of the things to do is to think through as many use cases as possible from that merchandising might require, that the store might require, that the brand might require. And just, get into the complexity, get into the detail, and don't lock yourselves in, because you want to still remain flexible to create value for the shopper.
Okay. When it comes to measurement, what's possible today and what's still aspirational in terms of in-store exposure to sales and ROI?
I can start it on this one.
Yeah.
I think, measurement is a hot topic. It comes up in every single conversation, every single industry event, etc. Here's my take on it. I think, and even in my previous job, we were always challenged on this because it's in store. Immediately, brands go into performance marketing and performance metrics, and they're looking for sales lift, and they're looking for incrementality. And did it drive a purchase faster? Did it increase the overall basket size? Now, the reality is in-store is not always about performance marketing. And I took note of it because, Colin, you mentioned that earlier today. There's even a study that was released recently by SMG, Kantar, and Coliseum Strategy, where they're proving that in-store retail media drives effectiveness in building, in brand building and getting the reach for brands. I think all the CMOs should read that. But let's not always by default bring in-store into a performance metric today. The second part, I also think where we need to make some improvement the IAB measurement standards is a great foundation, and it's providing a lot of the basic knowledge that we should have within measuring in store. But adoption is still limited today. And there's some experts, and I'd love to hear your opinion on that, that argue that a one size fits all might not be the solution, because all the stores are different, all the verticals and the shopping behavior is different by vertical. So I think to answer the question, the aspirational portion is, are we able to fully capture the value of in-store retail media and not just the short-term performance?
Well, it's a great point. You're 100% right. Everybody's talking about measurement, but I think the conversations sometimes are a little bit using it as a stick to beat people up with. Which is part of the reason I say that is that I've been a career marketer by trade, if you will, for years, and when I was doing tons of TV advertising, I was like $20 million worth of TV advertising a year. I never went to the TV station the next day and said, "Hey, buddy, how much extra sales did I get? Because other than that, I'm not going to spend any money with you." Yeah, that's never happened in the history of the world. But we have this, and I was talking to a brand very recently on this, and I said, "Well, why are you going on and on and on and on to me about measurement?" And they said a very interesting phrase, which was that, well, if you're expecting us to take media from another channel and it's got to stand on its own 2 feet, which was a very interesting one. I didn't say the next sentence was you never went and said that about your TV advertising, because I'm a gentleman. But it was quite interesting. They said, if you're asking us to do this. Now, their second aspect of this was that their complaint was, I'm getting different results and different measurement from various retailers. And I can't seem to get the exact accurate one. And each retailer is at a different level of maturity. Which my reply is exactly the same as yours, Jonathan, which is like, I suggest to the retailer that they do use the IAB standards. But it's a bit kind of a stretch to go and expect every retailer across every category to do everything everywhere all at once and all have sort of like Meta or Google-like measurement. And I'm going to double click on that for a second to explain my point. Google didn't have great measurement starting out, but one of the few benefits of getting older is that I can remember when Google introduced Google Analytics, because it was even called Urchin. It was pretty lame, but we had something, so we were happy enough with it. And then when Meta came out, let's say 10, 15 years ago with their advertising, they were able to introduce analytics pretty fast. Now, the thing is, they're what I call horizontal platforms with a lot of market power, and they can introduce these mechanisms around measurement and sort of, as much as possible try and prove that they work. Now, even with Meta and Google, they're still trying to show that they can stand at the big table, and because they got all these MMM measures and all these fancy things, they're still talking about it 15 years, 20 years later. Then here we are today, and all the brands are saying, hey, in-store screen needs to have amazing measurement. It needs to have all this like out of the box. I don't think that's a fair fight. So what I say is also, the other thing is my little sort of insider people in various brands also tell me that actually they can't really do that much with all this data, even if they did get it. Only the top brands have the resources to go do that. So when I talk about measurement, what I say is you need to think about it as a spectrum. Starting out, if you can provide basics like we showed it, here's the amount of people who engage with it, and as best as possible, here's what we could do, same store sales for that campaign. So sort of like an A/B test. If you can get there, and you can get there in the next couple of years, great, because you're still way ahead of the posse compared to anything else. Now, as you get into more detailed stuff, the real detail that the IAB have done with their amazing measurement studies in both the US, Europe, and in Australia, great if you can do that, which can show incrementality. But I say with the measurement, get the basics right first so the brands are happy, then move on to the more fancy stuff around incrementality. And then you get even further where you can then start plugging in data into what the brands themselves actually want. But it's very early in the piece at the moment. Let's get the basics right and go from there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more collaboration, at least between brands and retailers, and identifying what that true evaluation should be. The the biggest brands are going to do it with the biggest retailers, but at some point there should be something in the middle, and how you're standardizing that or evaluating this. I know some brands are also building their own, or they've built and using their own in-house MMM. How does that fit with retailer A versus retailer B? It still needs to be defined, but you bring up very valid points here.
Well, a very recent conversation I had with an incredibly well-run, very detailed thinking major global brand, and they said exactly that, Jonathan, which is that we've got our own approach sitting here. We really would like the retailer to plug into that, so we can take their data and our models and then create it from there. And I think we're going to see that for, say, the top 10 in the world. This company has a lot of resources, a lot of brands, and a lot of reach, but that will show the way. In fact, it's always, to a certain extent, as again, if I look back into the recesses of my brain, it's always kind of been a little bit like that, where the top tier brands kind of led the charge in digital, led the charge in e-commerce, and led the charge, and then dragged everybody else along behind them. And I think that's what we're seeing here. It's just we're so nascent, we're so early in the adoption curve that people are looking at it, expecting it to come out, fully formed, whereas in reality, the big boys, if you will drag everybody else along to a level of professionalism and measurement and insight that we won't recognize in a couple of years' time.
Who would you say? I know I'm not the moderator, but who would you say would be the best in class in that?
Obviously, every client I work with is incredible. I just want to say that, Jonathan, just in case anybody's listening. But aside from that, what I've seen some amazing things coming from Unilever. I've seen some amazing things coming from Diageo, amazing things coming from PepsiCo. Not all of these people are my clients, by the way, so I want to point that out. And you can see the level of thought and insight that L'Oreal have done, that Procter & Gamble have done. And, they've always been, Mars, whatever, they've always been the top brands. And so what I say to people is, if you're maybe not working one of the top 10, 15 brand companies, holding companies in the world, have a look at what these folks are doing and how they're thinking about it, and observe it and go, what can I learn from this? Because I've seen inside a lot of these organizations, and they think about these things very deeply. They're very rational. They don't get all emotional about the retail media or anything else. It's just like, can it deliver? We like it. Can it deliver? Just work with us on that basis. And it speaks to the point you said earlier, the collaboration piece is where they're at.
It's a good segue into the next question, because on the topic of collaboration, retail media networks have often been shaped by outside platforms. How can retailers truly take ownership of their in-store networks? Jonathan, I'll go to you for that one first.
Sure. Well, it's a question that I get all the time, and it's something we discuss in every single meeting, even us internally. Like, do we need to outsource? Do we need to build in-house, or do we need to take a hybrid approach? My advice is typically, choose with intent, not just by default. It's not because you've been in-housing all the time that you should continue to do that all the time. It's not because you've been outsourcing that you should be doing that. There's a lot of positive, there's a lot of trade-offs in every scenario. I hear a lot of retailers saying, oh, we're going to build in-house because we require a certain level of customization that we're just not finding the perfect solution out there. And I typically challenge and ask questions about, okay, but have you evaluated all the hiring that's going to be required, the competent teams that you're going to have, the ongoing operational cost, having to deal with technical complexities, having to fight with potential other corporate priorities that are going to delay or cancel the project. And so those are things that we need to think about. If you're outsourcing, the market is offering different types of offers. There's all-in-one providers. There's modular solutions that you can go with. Ultimately, I think the smart choice is to partner with someone that can provide you with the speed to market that you're looking for, the flexibility, and the technology that you need, depending on where you are in your maturity journey. If you're sophisticated, advanced, and you've been doing this for years, your needs are obviously different than if you're launching within retail media networks. In the end, though, just, I guess, my conclusion always is make sure you're not locking yourself into somebody else's playbook.
But I find this one very interesting because we've been down this path before in various kind of waves of technology, which is the build or buy discussion. And but actually, let's say 20 years ago, maybe some aspects of that build or buy discussion were a little cleaner. They were a little easier to have, if you will. You might not want to go and build your own SAP system, fair enough. But as we get closer to today, we realize that all businesses are technology businesses. You might say you're in retail, but the underpinning every aspect of that business is technology. And how are you going to build your own CMS that is fully featured, manage it, maintain it, look after it? How are you going to hire those people? How are you going to continually update it? And I'm just talking about CMS. If I look at right across the stack, it's exactly the same challenge. It turns out it's really only a few, as in very few, fingers in one hand, organizations, retailers around the world who can kind of do this. And ultimately, the best breed discussion versus build your own, it just doesn't work out. You've always got to build best of breed, because even if you always have to buy best of breed, in my view, simply because if I say I can do the same as whatever you got, Jonathan, well, yes, in principle, one could. I can do anything, within the laws of physics, I can do anything, but in practice, resourcing, management, updating means that actually it's a kind of a poor use of organizational resources, and actually it fires risk through the roof. And you're, as a senior manager in any organization, you've got to think in terms of budget, but you also got to think in terms of risk. And risk, by not buying best of breed, goes exponential.
So what are the trade-offs between partnering with third-party platforms to accelerate in-store media versus building and controlling it fully in-house?
Well, I'll take a cue on that one there, because the setting up an in-store screen business, if you will, isn't just about buying a screen. It isn't just buying a content management system. It isn't just buying, building on. There's operating systems. There's 24/7 uptime. There's managing and maintaining the uptime. There's even one project that I was involved in. I ended up in these discussions about how far the plug was away from the screen. How the Wi-Fi was going to work to power the thing. These are all, the list was endless. And eventually I kind of went and said, wow, I could never run a project like this, because I'd forget something. It was literally, there was so much to think about. And so you need professionals, if you will, I mean professionals in the wider sense of expertise, to think in terms of the stack and make things running, because a retailer is about selling product. They're not actually about keeping screens alive. What do you think, Jonathan?
There's nothing for me to add there. I think that's exactly what it is. But to add to your last point, though, yes, retailers are retailers and selling more products, and retail media networks are becoming media companies. There's already a lot of shifts happening inside the walls of a retailer. And then you start becoming a tech company, then you start becoming a media revenue company, then you start becoming a hardware company. Like, it's,
great point.
You're not focused anymore, right?
Yeah. It's funny when I talk to the retailers, and do it pretty much every day, if not every other day, retail clients saying, you got to get your head around this. You're a media business thing. You really have to get your head around this, because it's holding you back if you don't. And acting as a media business is a very different enterprise to acting as a retailer. And media businesses, whether it's print, whether it's radio, whether it's TV or outdoor, they all are very similar in many respects, which is you've got to have exciting product, you've got to have great packages, but you got to guarantee the thing appeared on the screen or appeared on the print or appeared whatever. And there's a reason they operate like that. And all those individual media types have been around for, well, many of them have been around for hundreds of years. I think, as a top trivial note for you, the first big outdoor poster was in the 1840s. And the first proper ad was for a Bible, and it was in the 1490s. So advertising has been around for a while. Proving your ad appeared, proving your ad worked. We all know this. That's what a media business is. Retailer is different. If you start saying, hey, you know what I can do? I can also run the screens. I can also do this. Where does it stop? Just focus on the knitting, focus on what you're good at, and then work with partners is what I say.
Where does in-store media fit in within the long-term retail media network strategy alongside e-commerce and offsite?
Well, Jonathan may have different views on this, but I know exactly where it fits in. Many retailers, there's what I should preface this by saying what I call the continental divide, which sounds very fancy, but what I really mean is, in the US, e-commerce is very well embedded. The power of Amazon, the power of some of these large retailers with their incredible e-commerce businesses means that many retailers come from their retail implementation from an e-commerce perspective, because that's easier to monetize and technologies, and there's less people I have to engage with in the retailer. But as we move outside that, as I said, the continental divide, and I mean this in a positive sense, that the rest of the world is still not as high a penetration. Indeed, the UK is still 18-20% penetration across grocery. A couple of categories are higher. But for the rest of the world, for the most part, e-com penetration is not there. The retailer has to start their orientation for retail media within the store. And that is the key starting point. So that's how it fits in terms of retail media. It depends your orientation. And so many retailers are going straight into, how do I make my screens work? How do I turn them into amazing brand capabilities? How do I turn them into performance capability? Oh, how do I work all the rest of them? So that's where it fits in. It's not less important. It's not more important. However, I've got one thing I do think that will kind of maybe set cat amongst pigeons, is that from a retailer's perspective, the level of inventory, the level of creative, the level of flexibility, and even just the overall, the fact where it's very early in the piece, means I think in-store is going to become the most powerful and the most important aspect of retail media around the world. And actually off-site and on-site will just become sort of a smaller part, just simply because the power of 80% of people around the world still buy stuff in store.
I was wondering when this stat would come up in this webinar, but definitely couldn't agree more. 80% of purchase decisions are made in store, and all the investments and the efforts and the money that you're spending to drive shoppers into the store, if you're not already set up to close that sale, then what's the point? I think the physical in-store portion is the anchor of any retail media strategy. And to me, it fits.
One thing though is I think making it binary though is probably not poor, but it's probably not quite where we're going to, if you will, Jonathan. Because if we think about us binary, thinking of it's online or it's in store, the advent of this thing here, the mobile phone, means that actually there's a little bit more meshing between in store and, if you will, online and e-commerce, because the two are going to blend together. The experience of what I see on screen, I can engage with in store, app, or whatever. So I think there's a little bit of a blend there that's going to happen.
Oh, 100%. I was going to say that, to me, where it fits, it's fully integrated all together. And there's a dream where there's actually an omni-channel journey where we can actually measure the shopping experience, and everything is going to be working together. Yes. When done right, definitely we're going to be able to see and influence the shopper across their shopping journey, both in store and online.
Mm-hmm.
There is no webinar without mentioning the word AI. So I'm going to ask the next question about AI. How do you see AI personalization or real-time analytics shaping scalable in-store media networks in the future?
I think if we just do it through one lens alone, we'll see the capability. And I'm sure Jonathan has lots of other lenses, but I'm just going to see it through one lens, which is the thing we talked about earlier on, which is the different use cases for screens. The use case for screen at the window at the outside is very different to the use case at the end of the aisle, which is very different to the use case of actually in the aisle in front of the product. And what that means is that you've got to think through every aspect of how your brand appears and what the message is. And that requires a lot of scaling. It requires a lot of traffic management, if you will. And I think that is one amazing use case for artificial intelligence, which is creating all the potentials for all of that, but doing it without having 1,000 people working on, creating different types of things. So that's one very simple use case that is a 100% guarantee is going to happen.
On the Broadsign side, when being a technology platform, we don't necessarily think about AI in that specific sense. We really think about the automation, the way that Colin is describing it, and real-time optimization. So how do we make all these tasks to manage a network of 100 screens or 1,000 screens much more easier for retailers to manage across all different types of content that's coming in internally or externally or via programmatic activations. And so it's all about automation. It's about automation of programmatic buys. It's about real-time optimization of content based on real-time triggers, what's happening in the store right now that could provide additional value to the shopper and just increase the overall experience. AI is great. We have some AI tools within our modules, but for us, AI is useless unless you have the full automation and real-time optimization set up first.
Okay, so what does a great in-store media network look like in the future?
I'm going to leave that one to Jonathan. That sounds like a hard question, Jonathan, so I'm going to give that one to you.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more aspirational or a dream than an actual reality, but I think that the future of an in-store retail media network, we need to stop thinking about just installing screens. I think the in-store retail media network, it should be a living, connected ecosystem where every touch points, and I mentioned it earlier, it's not just screens, it's ESL, it's other digitization within the store, the audio technology as well, where every touch point works together, all powered by data, all powered by automation, as we just mentioned. And that's what we're focused here at Broadsign doing, is helping those retailers achieve that for the future of in-store retail media.
Yeah, it's thinking through the lens of pure media and selling media is looking at the wrong end of the telescope. The screens are inevitable, as we said at the outset. So how screens are going to develop and the opportunity with screens will go into second order effects that we simply couldn't have imagined. But my ideal perspective in the next year or two is that the screens develop into their own sort of capability wherever it understands the power of what's possible, creates it as a customer experience. It's not user, it's a customer experience as they go to the store that adds value to them, adds value to the brands, adds value to the store. And they're not seen as an opportunity for a Christmas tree, where it's actually something that actually benefits everybody, but also it then leads into, as in plugs into, I should say, excellent measurement, and also even to things like stock holding and improving out of stocks, which are important for both the shopper and also important for the retailer as well. So seeing it as a full end-to-end, I hate to use the word omnichannel because it can cover a multitude of sins. So I'll say the word like from right through the shopper experience, right through the operational experience of that retailer. That's where the ideal one will go to, where we have everything covered together.
Okay, to finish up, can I ask each of you to give one piece of advice for any retailer at the beginning of this journey with retail media networks? What should they prioritize first? And Colin, I'll go for you.
You're going to start with me.
I'll go, okay.
I've been trying to kick over the difficult questions over to Jonathan, so that doesn't work that well there. Where we start? Well, actually, I've been down the road a few times now at this stage, and when I start with saying, here's what not to do. Okay, don't see it as a screens RFP. Don't see it. Don't outsource it to your procurement people. Don't do anything like that. See it as how am I going to actually create a new form of media and a new form of experience for my customer, and how does that add value? So that's the starting point, not like I just need another procurement RFP for another bunch of screens, which I see far too often. The second one is to think of it in terms of where we're going to. In other words, we are going to a capability where the screens, as we talked about on this webinar, are going to be able to do amazing creative things and deliver incredible measurement and plug into things like out of stock and stock levels, and so on. So think through the whole use case that's potentially possible from both the screens perspective, but also the content management tools that power all this. And then thirdly, or is it fourthly? Fourthly, what I would be doing is thinking about how do I build something that is not locked in, as Jonathan said earlier, where I actually can partner with people where we can scale up and down, we can be flexible, we can get updates much faster, because in case anybody listening here hasn't noticed, things are getting a little bit faster and updates are getting a little bit faster. Everything's moving a bit faster. So if things are going fast, you need to be ready to go fast. So therefore locking in is a poor choice.
Jonathan?
Well, my advice would be to follow Colin's advice, because those 4 points were excellent. But moreover than that, maybe at a higher level, everything we discussed today on screens and in-store retail media networks, I think it's important, and my advice would be, it's important to realize that you're not just adopting another channel. Like, this is going to take change. This is going to take leadership. This is going to need support internally. And there's a smart man that published the 7 challenges of retail media earlier this year.
I think he's a great guy. I might have met him once or twice.
I think you know him. Yeah. That retail media is change management. And so let's make sure that you have a champion internally, that your leadership is behind this initiative, because let's face it, the elephant in the room is an in-store retail media network requires a big investment. But that big investment can be backed up by a very solid business case that we can also help you build together. But if you, as a retail media lead, don't have the support from the rest of the leadership, that business case is going to be even harder to prove. So let's make sure it's not just another channel. It's a whole new business case that we can help support.
And the business case piece is important there, Jonathan. That's a great point, because the business cases has to include numbers, dollars and cents, and operational piece there. Right. But even on in fact, I've moved. I use the word change management as a label that people can kind of understand. But in fact, an even better one, talked by a friend of mine, was to say, hey, Colin, you should be speaking in terms of the growth opportunity around this and tying it in with the KPIs of the business and where management, senior management is at. And I was thinking, my language on change management should change, because actually the opportunity is around growth. The opportunities around tailoring it in, tying it in with the retailer's overall objectives at the really highest level, at the chief exec level, at the share price level, at that sort of thing. So it's as Jonathan says, it's not just another set of screens. It's a complete kind of way of thinking about how we actually retail.
Brilliant. Thank you both for joining us and for such valuable insights. It was packed with so many mental notes for me personally. So thank you. And if anyone has missed any part of this webinar, don't worry, because it will be on demand. Until next time, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Lots of fun. Tip top.
Cheers. Bye-bye.